Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast.
I'm having so much more fun now. I have let them show me how to live their way. At the midnight, earwig buffet.
Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 246. The Fun Ideas Podcast is brought to you in part by Freaky Magazine. I contribute material to every issue, so give it a try.
Hey kids, have you read Freaky? The magazine of weird humor for freaks like you. Freaky Magazine is a way-out collection of weirdo comics, kooky gags, photo funnies, social satire, and surreal collage. 52 pages of insanity in the tradition of magazines of yore like Cracked, Plop, and Zap. Special offer for Fun Ideas listeners, get a free sample copy in the mail, made of smelly newsprint and smudgy ink the old-fashioned way. Just message your mailing address to theslowpoisoner@gmail.com. That's theslowpoisoner@gmail.com while supplies last.
You remember them from your childhood. Casper the Friendly Ghost, Richie Rich, Hot Stuff, Baby Huey, Sad Sack and Little Audrey. You read them in comic books and saw them on television and in the movies. Now you can read about how they and other Harvey comic characters were created in two great books from Mark Arnold and Fun Ideas Productions, The Best of Harveyville Fun Times and The Harvey Comic Companion. Both are available from Amazon. The Companion is also available from Fair Manor Media. They are available in hardcover, paperback, and ebook versions. Order your copies today.
Friends, have you tried Lee's Comics? Lee's Comics is better than the leading comic book store. Wait a minute. Lee's Comics is the leading comic book store, based on arbitrary standards set by Lee Hester himself.
Lee's Comics was named as one of the 21 best online dealers by popoptique.com. To shop the Lee's Comics eBay store, go to eBay and search for Lee's Comics Inc. That's LEESCOMICSINC, period. Don't forget the period. Mention the Fun Ideas Podcast when you order, and you'll receive a free bonus gift. I plan to go on Charles F. Rosenay's Magical History Tour in 2024. And here is Charles to talk about it.
Hey, this is Charles Rosenay, sometime guest here on the Fun Ideas Podcast. Have you ever thought of taking a Beatles tour to Liverpool? Well, I host and organize the Magical History Tour every summer, www.liverpooltours.com. But I'm here to tell you about two other things. My books. Yes, Mark isn't the only author. I've recently published the book of Top 10 Beatles lists, where 64 celebrities gave their top 10 favorite Beatles-themed lists with reasons why, and illustrations and photos and all kind of fun stuff. Please check it out, www.bookoftop10beatleslists.com. It's the follow-up to www.bookoftop10horrorlists.com, where 100 celebrities gave their favorite horror lists. Enjoy the upcoming show, and thank you for listening to my ad.
In Fun Ideas Productions news, Not Just Happy Together, The Turtles from A to Z, AM Radio to Zappa, is now available from Genius Publishing. You can order directly from geniusbookpublishing.com or from Amazon. Stars of Walt Disney Productions and Pac-Man, the first animated TV show based upon a video game, and the revised and updated Looking for the Good Times Monkees book are all still available through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and through Bear Manor Media. Unconditionally Mad is still being formatted and should see publication in 2024. I'm currently working on an article about Mr. Weatherby and my TV animation book, and another Monkees book, and a book on Marvel's Crazy Magazine. More on these later. On today's show, we have a huge Beatles and Monkees fan who has developed many projects related to both groups, as well as performing in his own band. Here he is, Bill Last. Hi, this is Mark Arnold with another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast, and today I have a friend of a friend. Charles F. Rosnay used to publish a fanzine, and he's called Good Day Sunshine, and he's brought me a lot of different guests. Well, the guest we have today is Mr. Bill Last, who helped Charles make audio cassette editions of various issues of Good Day Sunshine, which I devoured and ate up, and I still have in my collection. So, want to talk a little bit about that, want to talk about the Beatles, want to talk about Monkees, want to talk about, anything that comes up. But here we are with Mr. Bill Last. How are you, sir?
Hello there, listeners. Glad to be a part of it.
So, I guess before I get into the Good Day Sunshine tapes, that's just one thing I wanted to ask you about. Tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got interested in music and Beatles and Monkees and everything else you kind of like.
All right, well, let's cover the Beatles first. I was in elementary school when the Beatles hit. I was 8 years old when the Beatles did the Ed Sullivan Show, but I was aware of the Beatles in the build-up to the first show because Beatles cards with the bubble gum inside were already out there. There was a little market I went to across the street from my elementary school, and they had your usual run of baseball cards and football cards, and those didn't interest me, but I liked all the TV program type cards.
Yeah.
And then the Beatles. So I already had some Beatles cards prior to the 9th, and I also had a Beatles binder, the one with the famous I Want to Hold Your Hand picture sleeve pose on the front with Paul holding the cigarette. Mm-hmm. And I was mercilessly attacked in school by girls who felt that the Beatles were only for girls, and the boys didn't like me because I had a binder that only girls should be carrying. So I couldn't win either way, but I stuck it out. So that's the beginning of my fandom of the Beatles. I was an original Beatles USA Limited fan club member. I've been a fan since January of 1964, and I have followed them my whole life. And I'll talk a little bit about a book I'm writing on the Beatles at some point in our discussion today. Okay. So as far as the Monkees go, and I actually had the opportunity to tell this to Peter Tork. How important was it for kids that loved guitars to be able to know to tune in every Monday night at 7:30 and see a rock band playing guitars? You watched Ed Sullivan, and there was the rock act here and there, and I really wasn't all that much into the variety shows like Hullabaloo and Dick Clark's thing. So any place where you could see guitars being played by musicians every week was just great. And so I was a Monkee fan from NBC Week in 1966, as they used to call it, and been there forever. I've had the pleasure of meeting all four Monkees over the years. I was a photographer in their 1986 and 1987 reunion tours, and I'll go off track for just a second. When they were going to announce their reunion, there was a gathering at the Hard Rock Cafe on West 57th Street, the old location in New York. So I was out in front as Davey arrived, and Mickey arrived, and Peter arrived, and we were all trying to figure out how we could get upstairs because that's where the press and the photographers were, and us peons, we were left downstairs. Well, I had to go to the bathroom, and after the bathroom, I come out, and who should I see on a phone but Mickey? And he's talking possibly to a radio station, doing some sort of short interview, and back then you had to feed your coins into the phone, and so he's going through his pockets trying to find extra change, and I held my hand out with some change, and he took it and continued the interview. So I kind of had a run-in with him first. I've been in the company of all three of them at various monkey conventions over the years. Working with Charles Rosnay, he would send me out with Peter Tork over the years, and Pete Best, to do different radio shows, both here in Connecticut and New York. So I got to hang with them. And I have a unique distinction in Monkees history here. I'll throw that in now.
Okay.
So I get Peter in the car, and he realizes I'm a longtime fan, and we talked about everything, guitars and the TV show and the songwriters that contributed and so on and so forth. And he was not aware that the line, never mind the furthermore, the plea is self-defense, he had no idea where that was from.
Huh.
Well, it's from Oklahoma.
Oh, okay. I think I have heard that, yeah.
Yep, so they're in a room with a table on it, and there's a judge that they're going to try this guy for supposedly killing another guy, and the judge slams the gavel. Never mind the furthermore, the plea is self-defense. And that's where it was from, and I got to tell Peter that.
And he probably knew it, too, subconsciously. I'm sure he's seen...
Subconsciously, right.
Yeah.
So right up there with Mr. Dabalina, Mr. Bob Dabalina.
Well, wasn't that one something on the airport loudspeaker or something?
That was an airport thing.
Yeah.
And then there was I don't remember what movie this is from, Clipper Calling Alameda. That's a line from a movie, being spoken from a plane in a storm.
Okay.
But that's all I remember about that. So, yeah, I was pretty much a Beatles fan from the beginning, and the Monkees from the beginning. And as I said, it was nice to be able to meet all four Monkees. And back then I was a photographer, which I really don't do much anymore. But I have tons of pictures from them from the 86 and 87 tours. They played New York and Connecticut and Long Island, and I saw each tour more than once.
Cool. All right. Well, that wraps it up. No, actually, that opened up a bunch of questions. So let's talk Beatles first, since that's what you brought up first. So you said you saw the gum cards. How did you hear about the Beatles first? Was it the news, or a hearing "I Want to Hold Your Hand," or what was your first?
I must have heard the song, and that there were girls talking about the Beatles.
Okay.
I've never been one to hang with the guys that talk about baseball or football or things like that, but if there's something music related, my ears would perk up.
Yeah.
So I don't remember exactly, but I know I had Beatle cards in my hand prior to the first Sullivan Show, because in that first series, all the photos were taken in '63. A lot of them by Dezza Hoffman.
Yeah.
So the pictures were already out there, and they were starting to, enter the market, because the "I Want to Hold Your Hand" single came out at the end of December in '63. So, the marketing giant went into production, and these cards came out there.
Yeah. I bought a few of those over the years. I actually bought some about 6 months ago. Somebody had... I guess they had them stapled in a scrapbook or something. And so I got a whole bunch of the series really, really cheap in comparison, because they had these little staple holes and everything. It's like, I don't mind the staple holes. Otherwise, the cards look pretty good. So, I got them for pretty cheap.
As I get older here, I'm starting to liquidate some of my collection in little bits and pieces. There was a book that came out that showed the face of, and the backs for that matter, of every Beatles card there ever was.
Yeah.
So now having that as a reference tool, I sold all my complete American Beatles card collection. I even had a couple series that were bootleg series that followed along the numbers of the real series.
I don't think I knew about those. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think originally there was 3 black and white series, 2 color series, and a Hard Day's Night sepia tone series. So that's 6 series of cards.
Wow.
But as far as the black and white ones go, there was a 4th series and there was a 5th series. there weren't very many cards in each of the series, if I remember. The other ones would have like over 60 cards in a series. These maybe had 25 or 30, but they were marked on the back like the old Topps Beatles cards, and they looked legitimate as if they could have been the continuation of the 4th and 5th series.
Now, over the years, I mean, you said you were teased. I guess over the time, things evened out, and both men and women enjoyed your Beatle collection, as it were, or that you were a collector or a fan?
No, it was just the fact that the Beatles were supposed to be girls, girls. That's what the girls thought, and the boys also thought
Yeah,
the Beatles.
but I mean, when did that change? You know, where everybody's like, "Hey, he's cool. He likes all this stuff."
Not very long after. It was only at the very beginning. I think by the time I hit 5th grade, I was already taking weekly music lessons, so I had learned to read music, and I was on my path to being a musician. But I think by 5th grade, there were other Beatle fans that loved them and had the albums in the cards, so I fit right in with at least some of my classmates, you know, the non-sports interested ones.
Yeah. Because I always consider myself, I guess, a second generation. I don't know what generation means anyway. Because I was born on the day they were recording Strawberry Fields Forever, so it's like, my earliest memories of the Beatles are always in the 70s, so,
that constitutes a second generation fan.
Yeah, okay. But I always like to say, well, at least I was alive when they were still together, you know? You know.
I unfortunately, in all the years since then, obviously I've seen Paul and Ringo many times. I did see George on his 74 tour, and when he did the Bob Dylan Bob Fest at Madison Square Garden in the early 90s, which was his last time of playing in America. Sadly, I never got the opportunity to even see John. You know, we kind of took it for granted. Oh, he's in New York. Yeah, one of these days when we're in New York, we'll go up to the Dakota and see if we can see him coming in or out. And you know, that just didn't happen.
Yeah, and you didn't even consider the Elton John concert, or was that a sellout and you couldn't get in?
It was. Nobody really knew about that. That was a surprise. The first time I even remember seeing that, and remember the news didn't travel back then like it does now. I'm sure you remember Joe Pope and Strawberry Fields Forever magazine.
Yeah.
Within a week of that Thanksgiving concert, Joe Pope had the current issue of Strawberry Fields Forever with a black and white photo of John on stage with his Telecaster and taken from that concert. I think so. It was in maybe 5 to 7 days that I was even realized that he did that. I was still a bit young in 74. You know, as I said, I was only 8 when they came there, but I was a hip 8-year-old, so I got in there right away, and it's taken a good part of my life being involved with their history and their archives and collecting and so on.
So you certainly didn't see the group together then in the 60s, right?
No.
Okay.
No. And my parents, even in 64, 5 or 6 for that matter, they would not have taken me to a stadium full of screaming girls. You know, and the sheer numbers that, you know, which is, you know, it's the sheer numbers of a baseball game, for that matter, whether you're selling out Shea Stadium for the Mets or you're selling out Shea Stadium for the Beatles, it's still the same number of bodies. Somehow going to a baseball game would definitely be more sedate and quiet rather than going to a Beatles concert. And even back then, teenagers didn't have the best of reputations. So, yeah, that's all we needed. And this was pre-drug worries. I mean, nobody heard of drugs in 64 and 65. We didn't really start to hear about drugs until, you know, marijuana in 66 and LSD in 66, 67. You know, before that, you drank and you smoked.
Right.
Cigarettes, that is. You smoked cigarettes. That was it. You know, that was the big vice. You know, and it somehow kids got a bad rep. I remember that Joan Baez was coming to Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is the major city next to the town where I grew up in, and all the newspaper reports were they had to have armed guards and policemen on horses, and because she was going to come and sing about the Vietnam War, and there were going to be war protesters there, and it was going to be violence was going to erupt. That's about the only concert I remember where people kind of looked at it funny. Not really the Beatles.
Yeah. I don't know if you said in your description of yourself, are you from New York or Connecticut?
Oh, well, I am born and raised and live in Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
I am a retired public school music teacher.
Okay.
I am a musician that started on the accordion and then graduated to guitar, bass guitar, piano. In the late 70s and throughout the 80s, I was a singer-songwriter and have 3 albums, 2 albums with my band and 1 album under my own name. We kind of got rediscovered a number of years ago. Just real quick, I started student teaching in 1977, and I corralled several girls from the then high school choir to do some background vocals on some of my music that I had written. So we rehearsed, we recorded it, and everybody had such fun. They said, well, do we have to stop it now? Do we have to break up just because the album is done? So we continued on, and the name of the band was Twilight Nuage. And Nuage is spelled Nuages. And for those wanting to know why the name, well, as we know, twilight is the patch of day between sundown and night, and nuage is a French term for between night and day. So we've got both ends of the spectrum covered.
Got it.
And, as I said, over the years, just my claim to fame is I almost had a song recorded by Barry Manilow. Had I had that song recorded by him, I'm sure my life would be very different because it'd be included on every greatest hits compilation. But the problem was, interesting, I took the song to a publisher, and he said, great, perfect. Barry Manilow's going to love this. I'm going to take your song to the West Coast where Barry's recording. Okay, fantastic, sounds good. So then a couple of months go by, and I don't hear anything, and I go, uh-oh. So he finally sends my cassette tape back to me saying, Barry loved your song, but Barry wants a change of direction. So he doesn't want to sound like Barry Manilow anymore. He wants to sound like somebody else.
Oh, boy.
Okay? And the next record he put out that could have been my song was a song called Oh, Julie. Now, you remember that big Barry Manilow hit?
No.
No, because nobody does. It was Barry Manilow doing rockabilly.
What year was this, roughly?
Late 70s.
Oh, okay. So after Copacabana and all the big ones and everything?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And he never had another hit single after Oh, Julie.
Okay.
So it's interesting. As I said, my life would have been very different had Barry recorded it, had he not wanted to not be Barry Manilow anymore, but that's the way it goes.
It seems very odd.
I did have a song that was licensed to be in a movie, which was called Queen of Hollywood Boulevard. I believe you can stream it, but it is not available on a physical tape or disc. And my song was used in there, and when the movie was completed and edited and put together, they tried to show it at various film festivals to get an interest in a national release. Well, it never did have a national release, and as soon after they started doing that, the lead actor His name was Michael Parks. For those of you from the 60s and 70s, he was in that TV show Here Comes Bronson.
Oh, yeah. Along Came Bronson, isn't it? Along Came Bronson? Yeah.
So he makes this movie, and they're getting ready to show it, and he dies.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So now we don't have the lead actor to do any kind of promotion for it, so the movie never went anywhere, and that's my second strike in the music business. But it's nice that almost 10 years ago now, this kid was working at a Boston university, and he was in a used record store, and he came across the album Twilight Nuage. Now, Twilight Nuage was recorded in a basement, and it was only meant to interest publishers in the song, not the band as a performing unit. So like 100 or 200 copies max were made, and I shipped those out to various publishers in the New York area, the Philadelphia area, the Washington, D.C. area. Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Connecticut, and Boston. And so almost 200 albums were out there in the world. Well, this kid happened to find one that the DJ probably turned in, or a publisher, and bought it, and he loved it, and he became our guardian angel. And I started to look up things online about Twilight Nuage, and they're all talking about whatever became of this band. They were just applauding the record. That album got good reviews in America, England, Germany, and Australia.
Wow.
And I knew absolutely nothing about this until the tell of it one day when this kid was interested in Twilight Nuage. He really spread the word for us. And so we got back together after, 30 years, and actually had a rebirth a few years ago. And then I finally cobbled together the third album, which, if everybody hadn't gone their separate ways, would have been a Twilight Nuage album, but instead I put it out under Bill Lastep. The end of this advertisement will be, if you are interested in either Twilight Nuage or Twilight Nuage, the second album is called What If, and the third album is Bill Last, and the album is called La La Music. And you can listen to it on Spotify. You can buy it on iTunes. And they tell me it's out there in a bunch of other platforms, but those are really the only ones that I deal with, Spotify and iTunes. So that's it. That's the end of my songwriting career commercial here.
Well, I also have a question about it. What does the music sound like for someone like me who has never heard it before?
Okay. I tried to write 3-minute pop songs that had verses, choruses, bridges, some nice guitar or keyboard solos, and I tried to make them as commercially pop as possible and not ashamed of it.
Okay. So,
I mean, there are songs that could have been for Barry Manilow. There are songs that could have been for the Monkees if they were still actively together and seeking output from outside writers. You know, Barry Manilow was really the golden goose of that era, because even though he did write a lot of his own music, they weren't the hits.
Yeah.
The hits were written by outside songwriters.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, he I always remember reading the Monkees were considered the golden goose in 1966, because to get a song on a Monkees album, you know that record was going to sell millions of copies.
Right. Isn't that kind of ironic? I just wanted to say this as an aside. You know, it's like probably one of Barry Manilow's biggest hits was I Write the Songs, and he didn't write it.
Right.
And then one of a similar situation, Harry Nilsson was a songwriter, but his biggest hit was not written by Harry Nilsson. You know.
Yes. And Harry's two Song of the Years neither one were written by him. That's the way the music business goes.
Interesting. I know. Well, let me just do this. So, how did you meet up with Charles F. Rosnay? ! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation.
Well, Twilight Nuage had started, so this was 77.
Mm-hmm.
And that same year, Charles was putting on his first Beatles convention.
Mm.
And it was a low-key affair. And Charles was a communications major at Southern State University here in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And there was a local record store called Cutler's, and I met him in there one time because the guy that was in the 45s department, his name was Larry. He was always telling me, "Oh, you got to meet this guy Charles. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he's planning on doing a Beatles convention." So one day we were both there at the same time on a Saturday afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
and Charles invited me to his convention. And when it was held in a motel, not a hotel, a motel, so it wasn't very large. It was basically a room for the band and a room for the dealers.
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember anybody showing films or videos back then, although that was to change shortly. But there was like nobody there selling stuff for a Beatles collector. So Charles said, "Can you go home and get some stuff that you want to sell?" So I did, and went there and sold stuff. And Charles and I have been together ever since. I used to do the audio issues for his Good Day Sunshine. I believe there were 5 or 6 of those.
Right.
And Charles and I have just been good friends. He's a brother from another mother.
Yes. So, how did those come about? That's where I first heard your name, you know, and it's funny, the other week when I was asking Charles for some new podcast guests, he says, "Oh, I can get you Bill Last," and he was about to explain who you were, and he goes, "Oh, the guy that does the cassette tapes." And he goes, "You know him?" And I go, "Well, I'm not stupid. I mean, your name and voice are on those cassettes, so it's like, yeah, I remember your name." So, how did those come about?
But in addition to doing those, I also wrote a column called The Last Word on Collecting.
That's right. That's right.
So actually, those were up and running first, and the audio cassette was a mixture of Last Word on Collecting in audio form, as well as the Christmas end-of-the-year Christmas cassette. Mm-hmm. So as I said, Charles and I have just been friends. I would distribute the magazine to several points of interest that sold fanzines at that time, and just continued. And Charles and I have been to see Paul and Ringo many times over the years, as well as the Monkees, group and solo, and different kind of permutations there. So yeah, he's a dear, dear friend, and I'm glad I got into his world, and we've been rocking and rolling ever since.
That's cool. On those cassettes, though, I mean, was there ever a worry at that time of, you know, copyright infringement or anything? I mean, because sometimes you put things that were, you know, really unreleased and unique at the time, but I mean, some of it has come out legit since. But
yeah, I would think the readership was small enough for them not to worry if anybody in the publishing world even heard these. At some point, Joe Pope did the same thing.
Yeah.
He put out Christmas editions on the floppy disk, the flexi discs. Mm-hmm. And there were other fan clubs doing audio editions as well. So no, and I just provided a service and put it together. I'm not saying I own it, and I certainly didn't make any money off of doing it. I did them as a favor to Charles. If they want to come after me for a percentage of nothing, well, they certainly can.
Did you help Charles with that one? I think Charles did one vinyl bootleg, which I ironically own. Did you help him with that one, or is that a separate project?
I pretty much, you're talking about Snaps and Tracks.
Yes. I couldn't think of the name. I knew it was something and something, and I couldn't think of it, so I'm glad you remember the name.
I basically put the whole thing together, the graphics, the cover design, the recording. That's really my baby. The only thing that Charles contributed is turning the Capitol label into a Geritol label.
Yeah, I remember. I'm going to have to dig that album out, because I've talked to Charles about it. He was astonished, and I had no clue that he had any involvement with it. I just picked it up in San Francisco at a record shop that's long gone.
Made it all the way out there.
Yeah.
Because, back then, you could get away with saying, produced for the fan club, not for sale.
Yeah, and I remember that, but I didn't realize Charles worked on it. And he goes, "You got that?" And I go, "Yeah."
He came up with Geritol. Everything else is my baby.
Yeah, okay.
And it's funny that other bootleggers picked up on the Geritol label and put out product of their own using the Geritol logo.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Either Charles or I had nothing to do with.
But there used to be a record shop called, I should know it because I can't remember the name of it, but it was around for years in San Francisco until probably the late 90s. And they would get like every bootleg under the sun. I mean, that's where I got Sessions and all the big famous ones, File Under and all that stuff.
A lot of stuff, good stuff came out of the West Coast.
Yeah. And every so often they'd get raided, so you'd go in the shop and there'd be nothing, And the first time that this happened, I was like, "Oh no, they don't sell them anymore." But shortly but surely, over time, they came back, and then I got used to it. So it'd be like once every 3 or 4 years, the bootlegs would go away, and then they'd slowly come back. So.
Yeah, I don't remember any real busts in Connecticut. I'm sure there were a lot more things. I always heard in the history of bootlegs that a lot of bootlegs would premiere and get initially sold at drive-in flea markets on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So we had that there. And I will fess up that I was somewhat responsible for an earlier bootleg that has nothing to do with Charles. It was called Scraps.
I've heard of it, but I never bought that one.
It has a black and white cover, and at that time, I put it together, the audio part of it. A friend of mine designed the cover. It wasn't a printed cover. Instead, it was a black satin cover with a white paper wraparound. And there were 200 copies of that. I think the full title was Scraps, a Unique Collection. And at that time, the goal was to put 10 or 12 recordings, some from the Let It Be movie, that had not appeared on bootleg before. That was the goal for that. And at the time, those recordings had not been on any other bootleg. So since then, they've been on a zillion bootlegs.
Right.
It's all part of collecting. You go after the Beatles at Shea Stadium, and you won't be happy until you see the perfect one. And along the way, you've got 27 versions of Shea Stadium that, after a while, you just can't watch it anymore.
Right. So I assume you got all your recordings just by trading or whatever at all these conventions and things way back when?
I was involved with Joe Pope and a lot of the collectors that kind of surrounded him. Being close to New York, there were trips to New York to different stores to pick up albums. There was a husband-wife team out in San Francisco. They ran a fanzine for a very short time called Old Brown Shoe.
I remember that, yeah.
I forget their names, but they used to put out a lot of bootlegs, or either that, if they didn't manufacture and put them out, they were a major distributor. Almost every month there were 3 or 4 titles that you could buy from them, and it was nice because this is when bootlegs got away from the white covers and the paper inserts.
Right.
Now covers were all beautiful, and some were laminated, and they looked like real products. So yeah, I remember buying a lot of stuff from them out in San Francisco at the time.
Yeah. And that's what I remember is, but I actually had my share of the paper cover ones too, because like you, there was always that elusive track that was only on one of those type of albums, and it's like, well,
So what was your first Beatle bootleg? Do you remember?
I think it might have been File Under Beatles. It might have been something else.
I go back further.
No, I mean, I have ones now that go back further, but I mean that I bought brand new, because I never even considered bootlegs.
That was a deal at the time, too, that album, File Under.
Yeah. Well, my story is, I'll say the brief story is I knew of the Beatles, but I really became a fan about 77. But I was busy collecting the regular albums and the solo albums and everything else to not even really mess with bootlegs. I mean, I knew of unreleased tracks. They would talk about How Do You Do It and a few others that just hadn't been released. And you go, oh, I wish they'd release that, And there is a record store that still exists in San Jose, California, called Streetlight Records. And they used to deal occasionally with bootlegs. But I think the first bootleg I got was through the mails, because I got on a few subscription lists where I think the first album I remember hearing about was called the Black Album. I never bought that one, but... I remember
that. Yeah, it was a 3-record set, and it had its own a poster designed a la the real White Album poster, and it was basically material that was taken from the double sets of Sweet Apple tracks.
Yeah.
There were 4. There was Sweet Apple Tracks 1 and Sweet Apple Tracks 2, and they both were 2-record sets, but some of those sides were very, very short.
Yeah.
So with a little pruning, you could put 4 albums into 2.
Yeah.
And that's what the into 3. Sorry, yeah. It was a 3-record set. They could eliminate an album, make it look nice, and that's what was on the Black Album.
Yeah. And I think I didn't get that one because it was a little pricey. And also, I don't know if the material attracted me. What I was looking for is just totally unique songs that were complete. And eventually, Sessions fit the bill. That was kind of like what I was looking for, is a single album that had all the complete songs that had never seen other versions. I mean, they had a couple alternates, but I wasn't big on demos or alternate takes or, whatever. Even to this day, I'm not that big on it. Like when Anthology finally came out, I was more into the totally unique tracks, than, take one of Ticket to Ride or whatever, so that's just my preference.
Oh, yeah, my first bootleg, there was actually 3 bootlegs that came out probably within hours of each other. Mm-hmm. And that was Comeback, K-U-M, and that just had a plain white cover with the words "Come Back," a hand stamped on it. Mm-hmm. The next one was called the Silver Album, and it had no graphics or inserts at the time. It was just in a silver cover. Huh. And these were also Get Back, Let It Be outtakes. Mm-hmm. And then the third one was the one from the West Coast on Lemon Records, which was kind of trying to put together the unreleased Get Back album. Mm. Those were the first 3 that basically came out simultaneously. The white and the silver ones I picked up because they were out there. It wasn't until some research and years later that I found out the Lemon Records one also came out at about the same time. And then people started, going back and looking for anything Beatles to put out.
Right. And I remember also getting, like, goofy albums, like, when the Ringo special came out in 78, somebody had pressed up that special onto an Ogner Rats album cover that looked very good, like the prop, and I was very impressed, and so I had to buy that one. So...
Yeah, now, after all these years, I used to have quite a vast vinyl bootleg collection, but so much of it is now out. Probably, as far as group stuff goes, as far as the Beatles as a group, I would say probably 99% that was ever on vinyl has been now introduced to the digital realm on CDs somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
I do still keep some Beatles bootleg vinyl, but it's the solo stuff that a lot of it hasn't transferred over into the digital realm. So to kind of get a good overview of their 4 solo careers, you got to have several bootleg vinyl albums in your collection.
Yeah, which I do. And I still have a few group ones. I think one of the reasons I hang on to the one you and Charles did, because I was going to hang on to it anyway, is you guys have a sense of humor. And I always appreciate that. I mean, even if the music is available elsewhere, which I don't even remember if it all was or all is nowadays, you put a sense of humor into it. You're saying the Geritol thing. So, it's like that type of stuff, And so just for that, the cover graphics are worth keeping that album. So that's what I do.
I believe the first disc, Charles and I were both on it.
Yeah.
And we actually sat on my bedroom floor in my parents' house that I lived in at the time and recorded it on the floor of my bedroom. After that, Charles pretty much let me have free reign, so I was the only one doing it. But I don't remember if it was that first one or the second one.
Yeah.
I had just 5 days before had all 4 of my wisdom teeth pulled. And I thought I sounded like Mumbles. I guess no one else would ever pick up on it, but I'm telling you, and I can't remember again if it's the one with Charles or maybe the one after it, but I remember I was in a lot of discomfort putting that one together.
I'll have to listen to them again. I mean, I just have them stored in the closet. I don't even listen to cassettes. I should probably transfer them over to digital just so I have them. I just haven't done it yet. But anyway, let's move on to the Monkees. So you're a first-generation fan there. I assume you watched it from episode 1.
Good one.
And did you see the Monkees in concert back in the day, 66 to 70? Oh, okay.
No, again, I was born in 55, so that I was now 11, 12, 13, 14 when the Monkees had their heyday, and again, same deal as the Beatles. They were not going to take me to a concert with thousands and thousands of other fans. It's just the way it is. Of course, like most teenagers, your life opens up when you get your license.
Yeah.
And, then there was no holding me back.
Yeah. So did you see at least Dolenz Jones' Voice and Heart back in the 70s?
No.
No, wow.
Did not. And again, I don't know if they played Connecticut or not.
Yeah.
But the first Monkees concert I saw was the '86 reunion.
Okay.
At a theater here in Connecticut that was in the Round. So you got to see them. You got a seat, and the stage spins slowly around. And I had a press pass that allowed me to shoot the first 2 songs. So I remember that first day they did an afternoon and an evening show, and I got to shoot the opening songs for both. I know they opened with Last Train to Clarksville. I couldn't tell you what the second song was. And then Charles co-produced some Monkees convention with others, so I was able to photograph the 3 of them there, one being in Philadelphia again in '86, I believe, that first year. So and I got to hang with the 3 of them backstage. I was lucky that they accepted me because I never picked up my camera to shoot them when they were off stage. They were there with wives or kids, and that wasn't my place to photograph that.
Right. Which is fair enough.
When I'm out and they're performing for us, well, that's fair game.
Yeah.
I even submitted a lot of my pictures from the '86 and '87 tours to David Fishoff Productions, hoping that I could get a picture or 2 in one of the concert programs, but that did not come to pass.
Oh, well.
And I thought some of my pictures were as good, if not better, he modestly said.
Now, as a first-generation fan, did you continue on and buy all their albums all through 70 with changes and everything? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember I became friends with this kid for a while in high school He was the one that had brought changes to my attention. And I wasn't surprised that it was only Davy and Mickey, because prior to the album, they had the single "Oh My My" out.
Yeah.
And I actually belonged to what was left of the Monkees fan club at that time.
Oh, wow.
And they sent the members a postcard. And on the front side were two black and white individual pictures of Davy and Mickey. And on the other side it said, "Davy and Mickey would like to bring to your attention the Monkees' latest single." So right then I thought, uh-oh, Mike's not there anymore. And so when Davy and Mickey carried on, I kind of knew it from the single. And do you know where the front cover of Changes was taken?
Well, it's a concert photo that has Michael in it. I forget which.
Yes, it was not really a concert. It was from the Merv Griffin show.
Okay, yeah, I meant to say a TV appearance, but yeah, a live appearance, I should say. That's what I meant to say.
The original cover has all three of them and Sam and the Midnighters behind them, and they just took Mickey and Davy out for the album cover. So now buying this album, we were going to hear the Monkees only playing tambourines and maracas. I don't know how far they were going to get with that lineup.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of surprised, but maybe that was part of the release agreement. It's never been made clear to me that they didn't just keep throwing Nesmith songs on the album anyway, even if he wasn't an active member of the group, because weren't they just sitting in the vaults anyway? And they could have made full group albums still?
Who knows nowadays, but, Mike was very well represented. He really helped put together the Monkees Present and Instant Replay, which I think are both great albums. And I like Changes. They weren't what they were, but it's fine. There's nothing to be ashamed about that album. The album that gets the shortest drift in their 9-album original run is The Birds, the Bees, the Monkees.
I love that album, actually.
Other than, it was obviously first on Cold Gems, and then in the 80s and 90s it went to Rhino, and then it went to a couple of other companies. I forget one of them here. But in any case, there haven't been a new pressing of Birds, the Bees, the Monkees in, forever. Nobody has it out on colored vinyl or any of that. It seems to be the album that is least represented. I think most of their albums, if not all of the original 9, are out of print right now, unless you buy the box set from Lino that contains all 9 Lino albums or all 9 CDs with a 10th disc being some of the singles and the alternate mixes for a little bit of a rarities.
Right.
But I don't think you can actually go out and buy Birds, the Bees, and the Monkees on a CD or even vinyl unless you get them in those boxes.
Yeah. I think the last Monkees item I've seen is on those record store days, they did the... what's it called? I'm going to say Monkey Flips, but that's not what it's called.
Missing Links.
The Missing Link series, thank you. Yeah, it was the 3... they put 2 of them on vinyl for the first time, and then the first one reissued. And then the first Monkees album came out in a double vinyl set in recent times, and I think that's it.
Yeah, it never ends. They'll always be reissuing it. But they are represented out there. If you really want to find anything, it's not that much of a stretch. Their original complete television series and movie and television special on Blu-ray is out there if you really want it.
Yeah.
And most of the deluxe box sets that Andrew Sandoval put together are still in print. Right now, the only ones missing are Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones. I'm sure you will get to that sooner or later.
Yeah.
And I really don't think there's enough outside material to merit a box set for Changes. So I'm not holding my breath on that one. But as all the other albums are represented by box sets from the Monkees to Present, with Pisces being the only one conspicuous by its absence.
Yeah. My thought is this, and I have nothing to base it on other than this is the way things go. They're probably waiting till 2026, 2027 to start a whole cycle over again, you know. Yeah.
You know, but I'd seen Henry Diltz in New York.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing a co-presentation with Patty Boyd.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're both photographers, so there were slides presented on a screen, and then Patty would talk about her photography, and Henry would talk about his photography. And I happened to catch, bathrooms are a lucky place. I happened to catch Henry Diltz coming out of the bathroom, and this was prior to 2016. Let's see, I'm going to get my decade right. Yeah, 2016 was the 50th anniversary.
Right.
I got my decades right.
You did. Yes.
And so we had heard that Henry was working on a book with another gentleman, and it was going to feature his photography, and they were shooting to get it out that year because then the Monkees were going to have a media profile and being their anniversary and everything. Book never came out. I don't know what happened to it. Everybody's getting older. What are they holding on to this stuff for?
Yeah, I don't know either, but I will say this, and this might be related to it. That same year or shortly after, actually I think it was in 2018, Dolenz and Nesmith appeared at the Egyptian Theater in L.A. and for the Head 50th anniversary, and I went down there. And Diltz was in the audience, and so was a bunch of other people. Sandoval interviewed them, and Diltz had a lot of his photographs put together as a short film to show before Head. It was like a 5-minute film or something of just various photos with a Monkees music background. And I don't know if those are the same photos you're referring to that would have been in a book. But
you know, he was one. He's probably more pictures than anybody on the Monkees, with the exception of the photographer that worked for Tiger Beat magazine and Monkey Spectacular magazine. I want to say his name is Bob Carver. I could be off on that. But I would say between this guy and Henry Diltz, the Monkees were covered more by them than probably any other photographer.
Yeah. And going back to Charles and I in my podcast, Charles and I interviewed Henry on one of them. And if you don't know, you should know, but if you don't, we've been working on a Turtles book, and Diltz did a number of photo sessions for them, too.
Very cool, yes.
So we got permission from Henry. Henry sent us a whole slew of photos, I mean tons, and I had to go through all of them. I mean, there's thousands of them, and I went through them, and I found like what I considered the perfect picture for the front. I narrowed it down to like 10, and then we narrowed it down to like 4, and then, you know, we got the top 2, and one became the front cover and one became the back cover, and that's what we got. So, but, you know, and, you know, of course.
I like the Turtles. I bought a number of their singles over the years. I don't remember ever buying any of their albums when they originally came out, but a friend of mine turned me on to a double vinyl Turtle collection, and back then you were transferring your records to cassette tapes. So that transfer, that tape of that particular album was really the amount of Turtles that I listened to. I think I wore that tape out, and then when they started to have best ofs and greatest hits on Rhino, that's when I continued to invest more in those. But yeah, I enjoyed the Turtles, and they do have a peripheral connection to the Monkees.
Yes, with Chip Douglas among others. Yes. What happened there on that is that Charles and I became friends a few years ago, and it's kind of funny. It just kind of happened on a podcast we were both on, and then we just became fast friends, even though I knew who he was back in the 80s. You know, I just never talked to him or anything like that. And he knew of my Monkees books, but he says, is there any other group that you like as much as the Beatles or the Monkees that you'd want to do a book on, And I said, well, I always liked the Turtles, and then that's what started that. We mentioned a couple other groups which might become future book projects, but, for now, Turtles is the one, that we're doing.
Well, you're out there on the West Coast. I'd love to see a book on Emmett Rhodes.
Oh, yeah. I don't know much about him other than, he put out a couple albums and he passed away a few years ago, but, other than that, and he sounds, I don't know if he sounds so much like Paul like they say, but he has very good music. I will say that.
Yeah, I mean, this, considering his second album, actually, he did the album for the Merry-Go-Round, and then he put out an album on A&M that had members of the Wrecking Crew and session musicians on it. But then his third foray into recording is he recorded it all in his garage, and he played all the instruments himself. Yeah. And it's hard not to compare someone that plays all the instruments, a la Stevie Wonder, a la Paul McCartney, a la Todd Rundgren. This guy had chops as a drummer. Yeah. I mean, he was originally a drummer before he switched over to guitar and songwriting. Mm-hmm. So he has that, whereas Stevie Wonder would do synthesized drums, and Paul's a very basic drummer. Emmett Rhodes really shown, I thought, in that realm. I love all his CDs, but especially the Merry-Go-Round, his first album his first album was called American Dream on A&M, and then his first album on ABC Dunhill was just Emmett Rhodes. Yeah. The music industry just gobbled him up and spit him out.
Yeah. That's always so weird.
Long story short for him, he gets signed to ABC. He puts out this first album. He even had radio play on a single called Fresh as a Daisy. Mm-hmm. But, they always say you have your whole life to make your first album. But then your second album, you have from the time you're finished with the first album to the second album.
Right.
So he just could not deliver an album in time, playing all the instruments. And the more behind he got, the more ABC Dunhill came down on him. Yeah. And finally, literally, he was broke. They just forced him out of the business. Yeah. And I'm sure ABC Dunhill just wrote it off as a loss, but very, very sad. And just to stick it to him one more time is, you may be familiar with the song, She's a Very Lovely Woman. You're a Very Lovely Woman. And that actually got recorded by Linda Ronstadt. Mm-hmm. It was on a single. It has never been on any of her albums. And it's never been included on any greatest hits, best of compilation. I mean, it was a single.
Yeah.
If she would have included that, this guy could have at least put some bread and butter on his table.
Right.
And it's just, again, every song that Linda Ronstadt's ever recorded is in the digital realm. The only way you can find it is if you go to YouTube and they put a still photo of Linda and they play the recording underneath, and you can lift the audio off of that, a few record pops and all. It has just escaped. Nowhere in the world has that song ever been on a Linda Ronstadt record, CD, tape, etc. Too bad. Very sad.
That's really weird. But it's kind of interesting how the record industry has changed because, comparison to, what you're saying about Emmett Rhodes, someone like, let's just say Adele, yeah. She doesn't put out an album every 6 months like they used to, or every year, or, sometimes it takes 4 or 5 years. I've kind of joked around as like, I'm waiting for her next album called 70, because she puts her age on the cover, and it's like, some people get the joke, some people don't, but it's like, it's like she takes her time and she's allowed to, it's like, it's just weird that they didn't in the past, you could say Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys with Smile as an example.
It's, music is more disposable now than it ever was. And the trouble is, unless you're at the top of the echelon there, artists don't make money putting out music. They make their money performing it live.
Yeah.
And that's really only puts the dollars in their pockets because so much music is streamed.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I'm zipping through the Grammy Awards, and 99% of the people, I have no idea who they're talking about, other than some of the presenters are people from past generations, past decades, and I'll recognize them.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not what it was. But I guess every generation has their own arguments and or complaints about music that preceded their generation. Now, as a friend of mine is fond of saying, every dog has its day.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind the current music, but it's like, man, it's kind of hard to follow somebody. You know, when they don't put out music that frequently. If you have to see them in concert, that's kind of a drag because tickets aren't cheap. They're not $5, $6, $7 like in the old days. You know?
Ridiculous. You know, I listen to CDs in my car, and if I'm not listening to CDs that that I've purchased or programmed myself, then I'm listening to news. So I really don't listen to a lot of new music.
Yeah.
As far as in my home, 99% of the time I'm playing vinyl, and it's again records I bought that I want to listen to, that I enjoy. So I'm quite happy. My psyche is overflowing with music that I love, and I'm really not looking for anything else.
Right. Now, in saying that, I mean, like if Ringo or Paul put out a new album or EP, like Ringo does, do you keep up with that now, or do you just don't bother?
Oh, I have complete collections of everything. As a matter of fact, I should like to mention my final plug is for the last 5 years or so, I have been working on a book that it will be tentatively titled The Complete Beatles Videography.
Oh.
And there will be 5 sections: Beatles, John, Paul, George, Ringo. And I trace all of their various video footage from the beginning of their solo careers to now. The cutoff date is going to be February 9th of this year. We're talking, it's a 60-year timeline for 5 different acts. And as I said, I've been working on this for 5 years. Some sections are done. I only have to update them. But now with the new stuff on the Beatles and the Red and the Blue and Now and Then, those will be good endings to the Beatles section. And as far as Paul, John, George, Ringo, you know, if they put out anything between now and February 9th, I will include it, but that will be my cutoff. I hope to tie everything together and have it ready to present. I'm going to arbitrarily say June 1st, and Charles said he is going to help me. I think we'll end up self-publishing it or going through Amazon. This way I don't have to make a financial investment and have boxes of books in my basement. And with Amazon, you know, they're made to order.
Right.
And I just want to share with people my collection. That, if anything, that's my specialty. But I have very, very complete collections on the Beatles and the Monkees, every which way.
Very cool. Is there a similar book from you on the Monkees too, or you know, eventually, or would that not be in the cards?
Well, I tell you, there's this book, and I'm going to my shelf now. This person did a really good job, and I don't think I can top it. It is called Good Clean Fun, the audio and visual documents of the Monkees, 1956 to 1970. It's by a gentleman named Scott Parker. Obviously, it starts with a circus boy on 1956 and ends with changes in 1970. And he really, if you do not have this book, it's right next to your book on my reference shelf there. It is.
Thank you.
It has everything you wanted to know, audio and video-wise. So, no, I think that, you know, I'm getting to the point where I just want to enjoy my collection. There's not as much to go after anymore. It also gets very expensive.
Oh, yeah.
So I just want, whatever time I have left, I just want to enjoy what I've loved collecting, enjoyed what I've purchased. The adventures of acquiring this stuff were always great. You know, sometimes the payoff is in the actual search rather than the acquisition.
Right.
And I've met wonderful friends over the years, Charles right at the top of that list, that we would not have been friends or even known each other had it not be for the Beatles or Monkees.
Right.
So, and I have a dozen or so people. We date back to the Boston conventions that Joe Pope put on in the 70s. We go back to the first Beatle Fest in 1974 in New York. Joe actually beat Beatle Fest by a few months, but they were both in the summer of 74, I believe. Joe Pope's was in July, and Beatle Fest premiered that September. Mm-hmm. You know, and people that I met there are still in my circle of friends today.
Mm-hmm. Are you planning to attend any conventions or make any personal appearances in the next few months?
Well, I don't perform with my group anymore.
Okay.
Twilight, sadly, ill health has slowed down a couple of members to the point where they can no longer play music comfortably. So I really don't do that. I guess when the book is ready to go, I will be... Charles says he has plenty of interviews and presentations he could line up for me. Okay. So I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the fact that I wrote the book, I compiled it, put it together, and now I'd like to share it with other people and meet some new friends along the way.
Okay. Well, when the book is finalized, you're saying roughly June. I'm not holding you to it, but...
I'd like to at least have it ready to give to someone and say, here it is.
Okay. Well, in any case, even if it was later than that, I'd love to have you back on the show so you can plug it again.
I would love to. Yeah. I'm going to keep your number in on my file here, and I'm glad I got a chance to talk with you. And like I said, I respect your Monkees book, and I do not give praise a lot because there's just a ton of reference books out there. And as soon as I start to see mistake after mistake after mistake, I lose interest in it. I always use this line here. I'm sure you know, being a Beatles fan, that John Lennon was really not born when the Nazis were bombing Liverpool. Okay?
Right.
So any book that starts off, well, John Lennon was born on October 9th, 1940 in Liverpool, whatever hospital. Well, the Nazis were bombing. I just close the book, put it back on the shelf. That's where it's going to stay. Yeah. Not going to even purchase it, because if they can't even get that basic fact right, because let's face it, a lot of books, there's not very many books left that you could write about the Beatles. Most of the people that were involved with them have either written their book or are no longer with us.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I don't need someone from years afterwards. I want to read things by the people who were there at the time. I have a saying in collecting things. I prefer to collect things of their time.
Right.
I don't want to hear about a 1984 reissue of this, that, and the other thing. And, nowadays they're going absolutely crazy with this AI, artificial intelligence. Pretty soon they're going to dissect every note the Beatles ever recorded.
Yeah.
And they're going to put out an album of 14 songs of only Paul's bass parts.
Right.
That's it. That's all you're going to get.
Yep.
And another album will be just Ringo's work on his hi-hats.
Yes.
That's all. So when will this stop?
You want Ringo's drum solos? Here they are.
But not even a whole solo. We'll only get a piece of the drum kit.
Right.
Because they can now isolate it. And
yeah.
No, someone just offered me revolver with each individually represented.
Huh.
So you have, it starts off with Taxman. So you get Taxman bass guitar, Taxman rhythm guitar,
brother.
Taxman hi-hat, Taxman keyboard. Enough.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, even though I'm younger, it's like I'm pretty much done with collecting unless,
But if you told me there's an outtake from 1968 that no one has ever heard before, and it's, then you got my attention.
A Carnival of Light or something, yes.
Yeah, then you got my attention.
Yeah.
It's just, the bootleggers, we have to thank them in some way. The best stuff bootleggers put out will always remain in our hearts in a fond way.
Yeah.
But everything now is so fast on the internet. I mean,
right.
with the same day that Now and Then made its audio premiere, there were already versions on YouTube of the same song, but with the section of lyrics that Paul and Ringo decided not to use, the middle section.
Yeah.
I mean, literally within minutes
Yeah.
of Now and Then being premiere, you could already get the alternate complete version.
Yes. Well, the one that boggled my mind is somebody had taken it and made it like if it came out in 1964, and I said, "Wow,"
Yeah.
and it's like it never ends, so.
Yeah, I mean, now they're gonna go to. I mean, one thing I'd like to see them go to, and I heard from somebody that Peter Jackson was going to work on this, is go back to the Star Club tapes.
Yeah.
And really, that could be very interesting.
Yes, I'll agree.
But then someone else offered me the Decca audition tape, the umpteenth version of it, that, of course, you've never heard anything like this before. Yes, I have. I want to hear it the way it sounded in 1960, because, what was it, 1962? Because that was of its time.
Yeah.
But I don't need to hear anybody deconstructing them ad infinitum.
Oh, well. Well, on that note, we'll give you one final plug for your book, and if somebody wants to contact you, do you have a website, or are you just on Facebook? How do you...
No, I only go on Facebook to keep up with my granddaughters, but people can get a hold of me if they want to talk Beatles, Monkees, are interested in my book, are looking for certain pieces of video that I will make for them. It helps. Whatever money I make goes right back into the acquiring other things from my collection. But I'm at Bill Last, I'll say that again, Bill Last at att.net. So you need all three L's in there, BILLL at att.net. Love to hear from any of your listeners, and please identify yourselves as having listened to this podcast, and I look forward to going back and forth with you.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Bill, for being a special guest today on Fun Ideas Podcast. And this is Mark Arnold speaking, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Bill Last, for being my special guest. Episode number 247 will be coming soon. If you would like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. Become a Patreon of Mark Arnold and Fun Ideas Productions. If everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, that would be a tremendous help in continuing the production of my books and this podcast. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. The opening and closing music for the Fun Ideas podcast is provided courtesy of Andrew the Slow Poisoner Goldfarb and is used with permission. This has been the Fun Ideas podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2024. Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you and good night.